we have no real media in this state. Well, you have us.
It's really time for a parent revolution.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what the left did with COVID in so many different ways.
Wind energy, especially offshore wind, is a big loser and just another government boondoggle.
Like, what's going on?
People are fed up. They lied to us then. They're lying to us now. They're assaulting our families.
What we do is we look at the lies of the left that they keep pushing out, that America doesn't work for black people. That is not true.
They want to now monopolize truth and say, truth is only what we say truth is. Damn the data, damn the science.
The key with science is it always needs to serve objective thinking. They just call anyone who challenges them a science deniers.
They're evil.
Shut up or we'll cancel you.
What we're going through is a cultural revolution.
This is big, and this is how change begins.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Ocean State Current Command Bunker. Now playing from In The Dugout, number 37, Mike Stenhouse.
Rhode Island's Secretary of State refuses to comply with the president's election, one of the president's election integrity initiatives. What will that mean for Rhode Island? Is a lawsuit coming? And how is Rhode Island overall in election integrity when it compares to recent goings on at the national and federal level? Hey, folks, welcome to In The Dugout. Your host, Mike Stenhouse here. You know, we haven't focused on election integrity in a while, but I can tell you there's a lot going on nationally. I get emails every week. There's a dedicated team of people across the nation who are looking and trying to bring some integrity back to our elections with state laws, federal regulations and laws, acts of Congress, all kinds of stuff going on. And my two guests today, we're going to welcome back Ned Jones and Sara Vieira in just a second. We're going to talk about that. And we'll also talk about where Rhode Island stands with regards to some of those issues. So without further ado, let's bring in two of the senior members of the national, the official name, the Election Integrity Network. We welcome back Ned Jones, who is Deputy Director. Ned, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mike.
And we welcome our own, Rhode Island's own Sara Vieira, who is not only Chief of Staff to the Election Integrity Network, but you're founder of Rhode Island Fair Elections and Integrity, an expert on Rhode Island election procedures. Sara, welcome back yourself.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. I can't wait to learn. I haven't done a lot of research on this, so I'm going to learn along with our viewers as we go along. Ned, would you just summarize what the Election Integrity Network is, and just without getting into any detail, just summarize the kind of work that's going on behind the scenes that most citizens don't realize that you're working towards?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Mike, and thanks for having me on again. The Election Integrity Network is a nationwide infrastructure of conservative activists who are very, very concerned about the problems with our election system. And so what the Election Integrity Network, that was founded by Cleta Mitchell in 2021, has done through the years is to bring in literally thousands now of these conservative activists around the country to work on the problems with our elections. In the first couple of years, we did summits all over the country, especially in the swing states, to bring people in. Matter of fact, we're having a summit this month in October right there in Massachusetts, very similar to the ones we had then. We also formed national working groups where citizens from all over the country would get together and start analyzing the different parts of our elections, the different processes involved in our elections. And so this year, those national working groups have developed model policies for state legislators, which we'll be presenting to them in the fourth quarter for sessions that begin next year. We tried the federal government. We got the SAVE Act passed last year by the House, which required proof of citizenship to register to vote, died in the Senate. We got it passed again in the House this year, and it's languishing in the Senate. So we know the reforms.
Right. So you've got connections nationally with federal legislators, probably the White House, I assume, and you've got connections with many lawmakers and advocates like Sarah's group at the state level. Would that be fair to say?
That's correct. And we have a president, the first one ever to start discussing our elections and election integrity. President Trump signed an executive order in March that the Election Integrity Network had a lot to do with the language of covering all aspects of our election and how
Oh,
they should
great.
be reformed at the federal level.
All right, we'll look forward to getting into some of the specific issues the Election Integrity Network is looking at. Maybe you can give us a little tease, some of the model policies coming up. But Sarah, first to you. So you founded Rhode Island Fair Elections and Integrity. You became part of the Election Integrity Network, and now we're proud to say that right here in Rhode Island, you're now chief of staff for this whole national network. You keep the notes, you send out the emails every week. You're doing a great job with that. Just talk about your involvement in all this stuff over the last few years.
Sure. Yes. Thanks again for having me on today. Yeah, I just started out asking questions back in 2021, and we still have a great group of volunteers in Rhode Island that are, really working hard to bring a part of our coalition is educating Rhode Island voters, which is what your program's so great about doing, is educating the voters of Rhode Island of what's going on with their elections. And I didn't know what I know now. I didn't know this 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So I think for me, it's been a definite learning experience. And all of our volunteers really want to pass on this education, especially with 2026 on the brink and the new legislative session coming up in January. It's very important for us to be able to talk to grassroots, but also talk with legislators. And that's been our focus since the legislative session ended in June, was to meet with legislators in Rhode Island to discuss the concerns that we have with our laws in Rhode Island concerning elections.
And federally as well. And Ned and Sarah both. I mean, again, just so people understand where you're coming from and where you're not coming from. These concerns that you spoke about, Ned, that you implied, came from the 2020 election. You're not claiming Trump won. You're not claiming anything like that. But what I think anyone with an open mind has to understand is the 2020 elections exposed a lot of flaws, a lot of security risks, a lot of integrity risks in our federal and state election systems. Is that fair enough to say? You're not here trying to redo an election? I mean, I know we're past that. We're a whole election past that, but that was never the purpose of your group, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's what it exposed was all the vulnerabilities in the process, and we weren't aware of them prior. A lot of people weren't aware of them prior to 2020, and now we certainly are. And so that's what we're addressing. We're trying to reform the election system so that those vulnerabilities are mitigated or not there. And that's the process right now.
And Sarah, just a quick summary without detail. How would you rate Rhode Island's vulnerability to illicit players if they so chose to try to create or submit fraudulent ballots?
Well, I think, like what Ned was talking about, there's so many lanes of election integrity. One of the lanes is the legislation piece, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, but also with the legislators let's talk about mail ballots. We have so many vulnerabilities with our mail ballots in Rhode Island that's a huge issue that when we talk to legislators that it really, there's no voter ID for mail ballots, for instance. You can ballot harvest in Rhode Island.
Yep.
So those are the issues we're bringing to the table because it's common sense. People
All
want
right.
these things.
Let's go to this headline that was in the news last week. The Trump administration has asked states, and I'll have Ned explain exactly what, but to submit certain, in an effort to clean up voter rolls, in an effort to ensure that non-citizens are not voting or are not on the voter roll. They're asking states to submit voter roll information to the federal government. But our Secretary of State, Greg Amore, has declined, is refusing to follow the federal directive here. Ned, what is this all about? What specifically is the federal government asking for, and why do you think it's either a good idea or not?
Well, as part of the all-of-government approach to reforming our elections from the federal standpoint, under HAVA, Help America Vote Act, which was passed whenever, I always forget the date, but it's that federal statute that controls much of what happens in a federal election. States have to do what's called list maintenance. They have to maintain their voter rolls, remove dead people, remove people that have moved, et cetera, et cetera. And the level of list maintenance is,
Now, is that required by federal existing statutes?
yes. However, what's been allowed up to now, a level of list maintenance, is they looked at the list and did nothing because there's no guidelines as to what list maintenance is. That's an area that we've addressed at the EIN. However, what the DOJ is doing is they're getting the lists to see what level of list maintenance has been done at the state level. And they're going to file complaints if they haven't removed dead voters, removed voters that have moved, et cetera, et cetera. Federal
Is it a
complaints. will be
backward-looking multi-year list? Let me see a list over the last 10 years so we can see who's been removed or added and all that, or is this just a present snapshot?
No, a list is a snapshot, but you look at that snapshot, especially in Rhode Island where you have ERIC, which is the worst thing that can ever happen to a state who's trying to maintain accurate voter rolls. You have huge problems in terms of non-citizens on your rolls, dead people, people that have moved, et cetera. And that's what they're going to be looking at. And they're going to file actions. They're suing the states.
Yeah, I'll get into that in a second. But let's go to Sara. Sara, so how would you categorize Rhode Island's efforts to maintain integrity on our voter rolls and our involvement with ERIC? Explain what ERIC is also.
So what Ned was just talking about was ERIC is the Electronic Registration Information Center, which Rhode Island has been in contract with for quite some time. I believe it was 2019. And our Deputy Director of Elections in Rhode Island, Rob Rock, was actually the administrator of ERIC in 2020. And why ERIC is such a Achilles heel is because they're toting it to states that this is a great tool to use to clean your voter rolls when actually the opposite is the case. And what we found in a lot of states that do use ERIC, their voter rolls are not maintained, they're bloated. And just to give you a snapshot, in Rhode Island, we received the voter rolls in June, and there's I believe 800 people that are dead on our voter rolls. So in that snapshot alone, if they're saying that they get, information from these other databases and they're using ERIC to clean our voter rolls, then there should not be dead people on our voter rolls, or there shouldn't be, 20,000 people that have moved and filed a change of address form with the USPS still on our voter rolls. So those are very big issues. And
if I may, isn't ERIC also accused, again, I don't know if it's been proven, aren't they also accused of trying to proactively have states register likely Democrat voters from urban areas, that have large Democrat propensities? Aren't they also trying to, even if they're legitimate voters or potential voters, but not registered, aren't they trying to get those people registered and help, therefore, Democrat?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we've talked about that in the past with Ned,
right.
The Get Out the Vote, the EBUs, the eligible but unregistered voters that they use as a way to data mine, if you will, voters.
Ned, so the federal government is collecting this data for what purpose? What are they going to do with it?
Well, they're actually reviewing the voter rolls to see the accuracy and how much list maintenance has been done by the states. And there will be, you see,
so they'll compare Social Security numbers to the Social Security Administration to see if this person, how many people are deceased or that are showing over here, how many Social Security show are deceased over here, stuff like that.
Well, part of the all of government approach now to reforming our elections is Trump has requested or ordered all departments to work on the voter rolls, so that you have the Department of Homeland Security, which has now put together something called the SAVE database, where you make an inquiry about an individual, and across all government agencies, they look for that individual.
Who makes an inquiry?
Local election officials can do it, right at the clerk, whatever you guys call it there, clerk level. can make an inquiry. You can do batches, you can do individuals, and you find out the citizenship status of that person. And it's done across all government agencies. And what the
What they're
DOJ
planning
is doing, the
This is what
DOJ
they're
is,
planning to do with that information?
pardon me?
This is what they're planning to do with that information?
No, DOJ is planning to review the voter rolls and to cross-check them against all these other agencies, and then find out the level of list maintenance that's been done, and they'll file complaints against those states that haven't done it.
Now, I'll get to you in the Secretary of State's response to the segment, but I just want to follow up on Ned one more. Now, I know we talked a year or two ago on the show that you were opposed to the idea of a national voter registration or voter database for voters.
Yeah, correct. It's a state.
How is this different? How is this different from that?
Oh, this is a review. In other words, HAVA says you have to maintain voter rolls in your state. It's a federal law. And so individuals can file HAVA complaints at the state level if they don't think that the state is doing that. However, what's happened now, the DOJ, who is the ultimate judge of these complaints, is going to review the voter rolls themselves, and they will take action if necessary if the states aren't complying with HAVA.
So this is not a national voter database?
No, sir. It's a review.
Okay. Sara, so Secretary of State Greg Amore says, no, this was an email that was forwarded to me. He says, I will do everything in my power to protect your information. What is he talking about? I mean, I assume he's concerned about, as if it's in the past, but I want you to tell me, you got to give over voters' name, address, social security number, date of birth, I assume. Now, the federal government has all that information anyway, somewhere, but yet for some reason, they don't want you to be able to associate a voter with that information. What's going on here? What information is Amore ostensibly trying to protect, or does he not have a leg to stand on?
Well, based on what Ned was just saying, no, he doesn't have a leg to stand on because this is talking about federal law. And as I know, a lot of legislators and elected officials in Rhode Island have said no one's above the law. So, right. But I find it curious that Greg Amore is saying he doesn't want to share private identifying information, or your PII, with the Department of Justice when they're already sharing it with Eric.
That's right.
Oh, they're sharing it with Eric.
Exactly.
And Eric is sharing it with other left-wing organizations. So he has no grounds to stand on.
Right.
He's already sharing it with Eric. She's right.
So, as Ned started to say before I rudely cut him off, the federal government is the Department of Justice, who's conducting the review that Ned talked about, is already suing Maine and Oregon for not turning over voter data. What does that lawsuit look like and compel? And is Rhode Island next on the chopping block?
They're actually suing 10 states now. I don't have the list in front of me, and they will win the suits. It's all covered under HAVA. It's information that they're already releasing. Rhode Island is interesting too, because the colleges are sharing all of the students' personal information with the left as well through a survey that they do with, I believe it's Tufts University. So this whole thing about sharing personal information, it's already happening. You said it, Mike. The government already has all this information, and they have no leg to stand on not cooperating with the DOJ and President Trump on this massive effort to fix our elections.
Sara, the only thing the government doesn't have is, yes, they have all that PII, that personal identifiable information, but what they don't always have is the voter ID, which is associated with that PII. So for some reason, the Democrats or the left don't want that link to be made. This voter information is associated with that specific voter ID. Why don't they want that to happen?
That is a great question. And I know Ned brought up the SAVE database a little while ago about checking for citizenship of voters. And actually, our group asked Greg Amore's office back in July, the end of July, are you going to use the SAVE database? It's free. You can check the citizenship of all the voters. It's available to yourself and all the local officials. And they said no. It was one word, no.
In Virginia, voter ID is public information. When I get a voter list, I get voter ID. So it's already associated to the person.
You don't get social security number, do you?
You might get last four in Virginia. I don't think so. I think they don't send that out at all.
No.
But you have the person, so it doesn't matter. You're already tying it to a person. And so their arguments are not.
All right, so clean voter rolls is one major push going on nationally. The Department of Justice is leading this review effort. If the lawsuits are successful, I mean, would there be penalties, or would the states be compelled to turn over whatever they want? Do you have any idea how that would work out?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I think if they lose the lawsuits, they'll be compelled to turn over the information. And then what'll happen is there'll be a review. There'll be a determination as to whether they're in line with HAVA in terms of list maintenance, and then there'll be further action if they're not.
Sarah, just quickly to wrap up this topic, a little birdie on the wall told me that they heard that Rhode Island is next after this first tranche of 10 states. Do you have any information on that? Oh,
I do not.
We'll be in the next tranche anyway.
I mean, I see it coming down the pike because you're following these other states who said about a month ago, we're not complying. And now Greg has said that a couple weeks ago. So
let's get to another issue. Another big push by the federal government is to ensure that only U.S. citizens can vote, or I assume are even on voter rolls. Ned, here is an election a media report that's asking citizens to submit comments. There's an October 20th deadline. Why we should ensure elections remain secure and only available to U.S. citizens. Ned, explain what this is.
Okay, well, under the current situation, anyone can register to vote by attesting that they are a citizen and signing their name. No proof required. We think this is a very, very loose loophole. And so an effort is now underway to require proof of citizenship when you register to vote. The way the president approached this is with his executive order. The Election Assistance Commission controls a form called the National Mail Voter Registration Form. It's, again, part of HAVA, the Help America Vote Act. This form has to be accepted by every state for voter registration. And again, all you do is check a box that you're a citizen, no proof required. So President Trump said in his executive order, the EAC will amend the form to require proof of citizenship. And he gave them some kind of a 60-day deadline or something to do it. Well, the EAC is a dysfunctional agency because you have two commissioners from each party and they never agree, and then they never get anything done. The EAC is not a regulatory body, it's an oversight body. So what's happened is the America First Legal Organization has filed a petition with the federal government to have a rule change at the EAC to require this proof of citizenship, and they're accepting comments on the Federal Register. So we are behind a massive effort to get positive comments on there so that we're building a case at the federal level to require proof of citizenship. And as of last night, there have been 15,000 comments, and I can't find one that's against proof that you're a citizen to register.
Where can people go to make their own comments, Ned?
It's a link to the Federal Register.
All right. Sarah, so where is Rhode Island in this regard? Do we have any, it's states that sign up people to vote, not the federal government. Does Rhode Island have any systems in place to ensure that a would-be voter is a U.S. citizen?
No, we do not. We just have the attestation form, which Ned was just speaking about. That's about it.
Do any states have procedures in place to ensure that? Do you know?
Only one, Arizona. The Supreme Court has ruled that the attestation is enough in every case for proof of citizenship. But in Arizona, their lawsuit was filed, and they now have two lists. One list where the voter can prove they're a citizen. They can vote in every statewide election and every federal election. For voters that cannot prove they're a citizen, they have no proof of citizenship, They're on a separate list and they can only vote in federal elections. So those people can only vote for president, Congress, and the
But
Senate.
those people are those who only fill out the attestation form?
Correct.
They are allowed to vote in federal elections?
Yes, that's the Supreme Court ruling. In federal elections, the
That seems backwards to
attestation,
me.
it is backwards to everybody, but that's the way it is. They have two different ballots, two different lists. They're checking people. We know there's crossover. It's not well maintained. It's a disaster in Arizona. But the big disaster is with 20 million coming in across the border, how many of them are registered to vote? Because once they're on the rolls, you can't find them. People say they can, but you can't. We're going after
In
them.
Arizona, if you attest, let's say you are an illegal immigrant and you attest that you're a U.S. citizen, you can vote in the federal elections for Senate, Congress, and president, but you can't vote for like governor or lieutenant governor or some local office.
Correct.
Am I hearing that right?
Yes, you need to provide proof to vote in those state elections.
That's
either
backwards. It's
election-
completely backwards. All right, Sarah. So does Rhode Island have such distinction between those eligible to vote in federal or those eligible to vote in Rhode Island?
No, we do not.
No, we know Rhode Island is a disaster. I forgot the gentleman's name, but we have copies of emails between him and David Becker at
That's
Eric
correct.
talking about oh, well, we have a list of non-citizens on the DMV, and they send that to Eric, and then you don't know in Rhode Island who's a citizen or not. You have no idea.
Mm-mm. That would be Rob Rock, Ned.
Now he has to, if he runs his list against the DHS new program, that's a great start. I doubt he will.
All right. By the way, I found this in my notes. So
There you go.
Here's the website where it's a long email, but if you Google it, you'll find it. But it's up here, regulations.gov. It's a long, take a screenshot of this. And if you're watching and you can put your comment in, I'll do it afterwards as well. All right. Next topic. I want to get to the post office in a second, but I first want to talk about mail ballots. Now, President Trump put out this Truth Social post that he wants to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots. I know he doesn't mean all, but mass mail-in balloting. Obviously, there are certain conditions even the president recognizes, like it used to be when people, might need can't vote in person. He says we're the only country in the world that uses, I assume, mass mail-in voting. Is that true, Ned?
I think that's been proven. Yeah, a lot of countries allow it with excuses, but very few universal vote by mail, and I think that's the distinction.
Now, I know states largely control how election processes are run, but when it comes to federal election, I know the federal government has some authority to say how federal elections must be conducted. Trump makes the claim here they must do what the federal government tells them. Ned or Sarah, let's go to Sarah on this. Sarah, what can the federal government mandate and what is totally left up to states?
Well, what we're talking about today, there are federal mandates with federal law, such as we've been talking at length about HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, and using, National Voter Registration Act, the UOCAVA, which is those overseas and uniformed citizens that are voting in our elections as well. So we do have federal mandates that we need to follow, and the states need to be within that purview. What's happening in Rhode Island is that there's a lot of holes that are in with our mail ballots. So for instance, we have mail ballots in Rhode Island that used to be absentee, as you were talking about earlier, where you had to have a notary, you had to have an excuse. That's not the case anymore. They even passed a law this past session in Rhode Island that if you're on the mail ballot application list, now you're in that for forever. And to get off of that will be taking a lot of, So, they've purposely put these laws into place to continue to kick the can down the road about mail ballots and widening the hole that's in Rhode Island.
Anything to add to that? Again, distinguish to what does the federal government have the power to mandate? Because I know they have some, explain to me what authority over federal elections mean.
Well, I think that's where we are today. I think President Trump is pushing the issue, and I think it's being decided in the courts. There's a huge case coming up soon where is it election day or is it election season? The Supreme Court is going to consider a case where all ballots must be received by election day, kind of like Rhode Island. But 19 states and DC allow ballots to come in up to 3 weeks after election day. Virginia's 3 days. There's a couple of them that are 7 to 10, and then you have some crazy ones that allow it for 3 weeks, as long as they're postmarked by election day. So the courts are going to decide. I think what President Trump is doing
This year, before next election, before the next presidential. When do
well,
you think?
normally,
When do
if
you
it
think?
gets to the Supremes, they hear the arguments and then they decide in June. June would be okay for the midterms, but not this year.
Okay.
But I think that's where we're at. I think the courts are going to interpret now, like the Constitution says, election day, not election season. That's an example.
Sarah, so if the federal government or Trump, whoever, has broad mandate authority and they mandate certain things that have to happen for federal elections, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that states can say, okay, either we're going to do all our elections in compliance with the federal guidelines, or we're going to have sort of separate processes for federal and separate processes for state and local. Of course, that's extra expense, extra administration, and all that stuff. But the states would then have to make that decision. Is that correct? That either we're going to have all our elections go along the federal guidelines, or we're going to have sort of separate systems. Am I right in that?
Yes, and I think too, what Ned was just saying, particularly with the mail ballots too, is making sure they're within purview of the USPS office, making sure that we're following the laws with federal law. It does make, like you were saying, more work for if our states do decide to make their own laws, then you're opening a can of worms again with being able to, confusing your local clerks and that kind of thing, and educating the voters and educating the clerks and down the line about what's going on at the state level versus the federal level. And that's what's happening now.
All right. So again, like I said in my open, we could soon be facing a situation where Rhode Island is out of compliance with federal law, and then they would have to decide how to act within that. So there could be some really serious decisions for state election officials to be making soon.
That's correct.
Okay. Ned, agree, just staying on agree the old way of mail ballots, as Sarah originally described, only limited to people with legitimate excuses and only when notarized, or as we used to have in Rhode Island, or validated by two other signatures of voters. Are you okay with the original mail ballot system that many states and that we in Rhode Island had?
Oh yeah, absentee voting, and that's one of our
Absentee
model
voting.
policies for the states is if you have an excuse that you cannot be at your precinct on election day to vote in person, then you're eligible for an absentee ballot. I was looking at the application in Rhode Island last night. It's kind of interesting. You have about 4 different excuses for voting by mail, and the last one is I want to vote by mail. So the last one is no excuse at all. I just want to do it. So
And Sarah, with a 3 or 4 week, with the polls open for 3 or 4 weeks, that would, even if we kept that, which is questionable whether we should, but even with, and you had to have a legitimate excuse, that would really narrow the field because, okay, I can't get there November 7th or whatever the date is, but certainly I could get there October 20th, October 25th, October 27th, November 1st, right? So that would really be something, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. We started voting in our election, which election day is November 5th. We started voting 2 weeks ago here in Virginia. So
In Virginia.
45 days.
By the way, who's going to win the governor?
That's a tough call right now, boy. I hope Winsome Sears pulls it out. We'll see.
All right. I just talked to my buddy who lives in New Jersey, and he thinks the Republican probably will squeak it out there, but we'll see. Okay. All right, Ned, I know one thing you'd like to talk about is the new changes in the, is this law now, or is this a proposal about changing the meaning of a postmark?
Yes.
Seems pretty straightforward, but how are election officials supposed to deal with this now?
All right. Well, speaking of voting by mail, one of the things that the post office has proposed, and it's a proposal right now, is to add a section to their manual that changes the definition of a postmark. A postmark has always meant the day they received mail, check in the mail.
The post office?
Yeah. They've always
The
used
day
the
the post
postmark.
office receives the mail. Which post office? The first post office?
Correct. When it was received by the Postal Service. Okay. But they've changed their system now as of 2021 called the Delivering for America, where every piece of mail goes to a central regional processing center. All the mail in Rhode Island goes to Boston. If you mail a letter to your next door neighbor, it goes to Boston and then comes back to be delivered.
So is it postmarked when the local post office gets it or when the Boston central office gets it?
All postmarks are applied by a machine at this regional center. So it's put on in Boston. And the postmark could be put on days after it's received by the Postal Service. So they've changed the definition now. It's called a day we possess the mail. So it's no longer saying the day we receive the mail, it's a day we possess the mail. And it's going to be up, now I'm going to talk about ballots, okay? It's going to be up to the voter in a state where the postmark is important, not Rhode Island necessarily, to get their own proof of the day they mailed the ballot. Now in Rhode Island, you're not one of the states that lets ballots come in after Election Day. All your ballots must be received by Election Day at 8 p.m. However,
by the Board of Elections?
your local precinct, I guess, but I'm not sure how it works. I'll explain that. Sarah can explain.
Yeah, we'll talk to Sarah about that.
So what happens is ballots go to Boston, they come back. I was really curious because it looks like all of your mail ballots go to Providence. But even if somebody in Providence mails their ballot, it goes to Boston and comes back. If you cut it close, let's say you put your ballot in the mail on the Friday before election, it may not make it back because they're holding mail at the local post office, building efficient loads to the regional center. So it could be a delay there. If there's a weekend involved, like before the election, it's held over the weekend. The system is creating delay that could impact even Rhode Island's way of handling ballots. My main question for Sarah is, why in the world would all of the ballots be addressed to Providence, and then where do they go from there?
Well, because they've centralized our mail ballots.
Where do they count them?
They count them at the Board of Elections,
In Providence.
Isn't that against state law?
Yeah, I thought you have to count them locally.
Mail ballots are counted centrally at the Board of Elections.
That's how they're counted. Is that what the law says, though, Sarah?
Well, the law says you apply for them in your local precinct. You can mail them whenever you want in the state. And then from there, they go from what Ned is saying now, they go to Boston and then they will come back. The problem I have is the Board of Elections is also housed in Cranston. And so when Ned brought this to my attention, I was a little concerned because I didn't know why they were still going back to Providence when the Board of Elections mail sorter, the Blue Crest sorter, everything is in Cranston.
All right, so help me, correct me where I'm mistaken here, but I remember years ago reading quite clearly in state election law that all ballots from a precinct, it didn't distinguish, I don't think, between mail and in person, are to be counted at the precinct level.
They are not counted at your precinct level.
But what I'm asking is, does the law say they're supposed to be?
They are not. They are now changed. They've also changed that where your ballots are brought by your local official, or they have to be witnessed and brought and transported to the Board of Elections. And that's where they have their sorting machine for mail ballots at the Board of Elections.
Okay,
they've changed the law.
A quick question on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it also says you can turn your ballot into the local, I don't know what you call them, clerk or whatever.
Yes.
You can turn it
into
there. So then what happens to that ballot? Where's that counted?
So that ballot is not counted at the precinct. There is a special person who is supposedly providing oversight with the ballots with the local clerk. And those ballots are put in a zipped bag. The zipped bag is in a car or transport vehicle, and they are brought to the Board of Elections, and that's where they're counted.
On election day.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So that could lead to other chain of custody issues,
Yes.
right?
There are tons of issues with our chain of custody. There's no oversight with the mail ballots when they are dropped off at a local clerk. We've talked about this at length with Rob Rock and our Board of Elections, Miguel Nunez, at Board of Elections, and they continue to assure us that everything is fine. However, we're looking for documentation on, who's providing the oversight with the ballots, who's witnessing the ballots, how many were picked up in, let's say, Cranston or Barrington, how many were picked up, and then how many were brought to Cranston, what was the oversight in that? I mean, we don't have the documentation to prove that if there were 10 ballots picked up on Barrington on November 2nd and they were brought to Cranston, who was the oversight? Were there actually 10 ballots? Were there more ballots? Were there less ballots? We don't have that.
All right. Wow. All right.
That's
a whole nother issue, but let's go back to the postmark issue. So, Ned, let me understand what's going on here, because I'm not sure I do. I think you said in 2021, the Postal Service changed the definition of postmark.
No. They changed their logistics system to go to these regional centers. The mail was being processed locally up until 2021 when they changed it over to the regional centers. There's 60 of them around.
And they're postmarked then at the regional center.
Yes.
Okay. My question now is, that was 4 years ago. Is there some effort to change that now? Why is that relevant now?
Well, in 2024, what they had to do, because of this new way of handling mail, they had to go to what's called local processing. So if they could identify ballots, they would hand stamp them with a postmark locally and get them back to the election office. What it sounds like now is, rather than do that, they're changing the definition of a postmark, and they're making it the responsibility of the voter to confirm the day they turned in the ballot. And they can do that by getting the clerk to stamp their envelope right in front of them, or buy a certificate of mail, which is cost to the voter, or send it registered or certified, which doesn't guarantee delivery. So they've changed the whole way a voter has to understand to vote by mail. And my problem with that is that it's going to take a massive education of the voters. And
voting should not be that hard. It really
correct.
should.
It should be. And here's the bottom line.
Easy to vote, hard to cheat.
We're talking about the vulnerabilities that I mentioned earlier, okay? We're saying these vulnerabilities create the problems. If everybody voted in person on election day, that's the goal.
So the ideal is easy to vote, hard to cheat.
Yes.
This process that Ned just described, Sarah, makes it harder to vote and easier to cheat.
Right? Exactly.
It's going to completely ass backwards.
Well, it's kind of like the Arizona thing.
I should have said.
Kind of like when we talked about Arizona a little while ago. It doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. I know.
All right. Let's wrap up and just have you each give an overview. Ned, nationally, Sara, Rhode Island. Ned, because of the work of your Election Integrity Network and Sara's and other groups, is this all just talk? Are elections getting more secure? Is it federally? Are you seeing states making changes? Just summarize what's happening nationally, and then we'll have Sara summarize what's happening, good direction or bad, in Rhode Island. But Ned, first you give us a national overview of what actually has improved or not.
Okay, we are headed in the right direction, absolutely. You think back to the summer of 2020, okay? We had COVID. The left was filing one lawsuit after another to install massive vote by mail. And we saw what happened in 2020. We woke up after the election, and in my own case, my anger turned into action. And there's thousands of people like us who are concerned about just what we've been talking about this morning, the vulnerabilities in our election process that need to be fixed. And now it's not just local activists. we have the federal government involved in fixing our elections. And it's going to be a struggle. I mean, you see what happens to everything that we try to fix at the federal level. There's a lawsuit filed by those that don't want it fixed. But we're
Well,
on the
that's what
right
I'm
track.
asking. I know you're concerned. I know you're making recommendations, but is it actually making a difference?
It will make a difference. We can't say that it's making a difference right now. I think that the awareness and the too big to rig turnout last year had a lot to do with conservative activists getting involved in the election process, and I think more of that's going to happen. But what we really need, we need state legislators to reform their election processes, and that's where there's unfortunately too much resistance.
All right, Sarah, is any of that happening in Rhode Island?
Well, yes, and I think that's where we
Yes?
pivoted. Well, we are pivoting, so we are working with legislators that would like to meet with us.
That's just talk. Is anything happening? Has anything happened yet to improve election integrity in this state?
I think we need to watch this legislative cycle that's coming up because we're going to have some really great election laws that are going to be proposed. And I think we really need to echo that and whoever's making these decisions, we really need to make sure we're putting on social media and blasting it out because people need to know that these legislators are really trying in this blue state to try to make some changes, particularly with the mail ballots that we talked about.
Bipartisan legislators?
That's the issue. Is the bipartisanship. It does need to be bipartisan.
But again, I'm asking you, do we have reason to believe that it will be bipartisan? Do we have reason to believe that that won't just be proposed, that they'll actually
No,
pass?
I don't.
Do we have?
It's not bipartisan yet, but it's definitely, we're working on it. It's a work in progress.
So in other words, nothing's going to happen in this state. Okay.
Well, one thing that we should mention, though, public surveys have shown that what we're talking about are 80-20 issues. And the public is for the things that should be reformed, voter ID, just what we've been talking about. So that has not registered with the legislators yet. But I guess I'm an optimist. I have seen signs of improvement in our elections. We got conservative voters to vote early. When you have early voting, vote early. Save your vote, protect your vote. We saw that. We see a decline in vote by mail. People are getting the message that don't ever put your ballot in the mail because you have no idea what happens to it after that. We've seen a change in funding, and this is really interesting. I've been on this show before talking about the left, and the funding, it hasn't dried up, but it's changed. The donorship to these left-wing nonprofits that impact
Zuckerberg, for instance.
Correct. And Gates just pulled out of an organization called Arabella Advisors. That's a whole other show. But he was one of the heaviest donors to Arabella Advisors, which is a, pass-through money laundering thing. The other thing, and this is another show we'll have to do someday, but the USAID, foreign aid going overseas, may be coming back into the election systems domestically. That's being investigated right now. You have the DOJ investigation. You have President Trump pushing it. I think there's a lot happening right now, and I think we're going to see the results in the midterm.
All right. And Sarah, one question for you. Rhode Island is silent on the issue of ballot harvesting, which in other words means it's legal in large part. Somebody told me that somebody well placed, but it's just rumor that by next year's elections, ballot harvesting or unregulated ballot harvesting will be illegal in every state. Do you have any reason to believe that could be true?
Well, I have no idea. I haven't heard that, but I'm for it because we do know we do know that is a definite. No.
All right. So nothing. Ned, you aware of anything like that?
No, and it's legal in Virginia. You just can't pay somebody to do it.
Yeah.
It's another loophole, another vulnerability for sure.
We're heading into 2026 election season. It's there's no presidential election, but in Rhode Island we do have statewide offices for governor and everything else, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, whatnot, lieutenant governor. So Sarah, we will be having you on for sure, and Ned will certainly have you back as well to talk about what is going on in the legislative session that Sarah talked about. What kind of good bills are being put forward, and who's for it, who's against it. I hope it becomes a issue in our gubernatorial race. It's never really been brought up before. I hope that some candidate was a lot of issues that just get ignored in statewide issues, and election integrity is certainly one of them. So once again, I want to thank you, Ned, and thank you, Sara, for joining us here. Good luck with and continued success with your election integrity network, and Sara with your Rhode Island effort. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
And thank you for tuning in. There's so many of us, myself included, who have very little faith in our election integrity, our election process. Many of us believe that these vulnerabilities were purposely instituted so that fraudulent actors could take advantage of the system. And I believe that is happening in our state. And I'm sure many of you who are watching believe the same thing. We just got to make sure that we eliminate those loopholes. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you again to my guests. We'll have more on this topic as we approach the 2026 election season. So for In the Dugout, Mike Stenhouse out. We'll see you next week.